The wind was howling, sharp and cold, as my fingers dug into the jagged rock face. Below me, the ground seemed miles away. One wrong step, and I'd be just another name in the local news. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it over the whistling wind. And then I saw him, Shadow, a terrified German shepherd, stranded on a narrow ledge halfway down the cliff. His paws were scraped, his chest rising and falling fast, and his wide brown eyes locked onto mine. He was trapped, and if I didn't get to him soon, he wouldn't make it through the night. I'm not a climber. I don't do daring rescues. But when I heard his desperate barks echoing through the canyon, something inside me wouldn't let me walk away. I didn't know it then, but climbing down that cliff to save a dog was about to change my life and reveal something incredible I could never have imagined. Would you risk your life for a stranger's dog? I had no time to think. All I knew was that Shadow needed me, and I wasn't going to let him down. The town where this all began is small, almost hidden among the mountains. On one side, it's all winding trails and postcard-perfect views. On the other, it's sharp cliffs that drop without warning, where even a single misstep could end in disaster. It's the kind of place where nature feels both breathtaking and unforgiving at the same time. Locals know these trails like the back of their hand. But for visitors, it can be dangerous. Cell signals vanish once you step too far into the canyon. The wind can shift out of nowhere, carrying sounds in strange ways. Sometimes you hear what's far away and miss what's right in front of you. It was in this wild, unpredictable place that I first heard shadows cry. My name is Maya, and I'm not what you'd call fearless. I work at a small cafe in town, the kind where everyone knows your name and asks about your day. On weekends, I help out at the local animal shelter. That's about as adventurous as my life usually gets. But there's one thing about me people don't see at first glance. I can't ignore an animal in pain. Maybe it's because of what happened a year ago. I had a dog once. Her name was Luna, a sweet rescue with golden fur and a heart of pure sunshine. One stormy night, she slipped her collar and ran. We searched for days. Posters, calls, tears, but she never came home. I still carry that loss like a weight. So when I hear a bark or a whimper, I can't help it. I see Luna. I see the chance to save someone else's best friend, even if I couldn't save mine. That day, when someone mentioned a missing German shepherd named Shadow, I didn't think twice. I didn't know him, but I knew the sound of a family breaking apart, and I knew I wouldn't let history repeat itself. It was supposed to be just another sunny afternoon in town. A visiting family, 2 parents, their young daughter, and Shadow, their 2-year-old German shepherd, had come to hike one of the popular trails. Shadow was full of energy, the kind of dog who wanted to chase every butterfly and sniff every corner of the world. But then, everything changed in an instant. A rumble of thunder rolled across the mountains, sudden and sharp. Shadow spooked, pulling free from his collar and bolting into the woods. Within seconds, he was gone, swallowed by the trees and the cliffs beyond. I first heard about it when I walked past the trailhead parking lot. The little girl was crying, holding Shadow's empty leash. Her father was pacing, shouting Shadow's name into the distance. Panic was already creeping in. It was late afternoon, and in the mountains, darkness doesn't wait. Someone muttered about a cliff near the upper ridge, and my heart sank. Dogs don't always see the edge until it's too late. I could feel it, a sense of urgency like static in the air. I hadn't planned to get involved, but something deep inside whispered, "Go find him, Maya. Don't let this dog vanish like Luna." We fanned out along the lower switchbacks, calling, whistling, rattling treat bags. Nothing. 10 minutes. 20. Then a single bark, thin, wind-torn, floated in from somewhere above the trail, then vanished. Everyone froze. We called again. Silence. Another gust, another faint bark, this time sounding farther out, like it was bouncing off rock. We tried scrambling up a chute of loose gravel. It ended in sheer wall. One hiker ran to the overlook, no sign. Cell bars, 0. The ranger station radioed back, rescue team en route, ETA 2 hours. The sun was already kissing the ridgeline. Temperature drops fast after dark. If Shadow was injured, He might not last the night. The little girl kept saying, he's scared of thunder. He'll try to come to voices. That hurt. I cupped my hands and shouted, Shadow, and got a single answering bark, definitely below an exposed cliff band. We couldn't reach him from the trail, unless somebody climbed. I stared at that cliff, my stomach twisting. The ledge where Shadow was barking was narrow, uneven, and halfway down a sheer drop. It wasn't just dangerous, it was reckless. I'm no professional climber. I've hiked these trails for years, sure, but I've never dangled off the side of a mountain. Don't even think about it. One of the hikers warned me. The rescue team will handle it when they arrive. But every minute we waited, the light dimmed and the wind picked up. I could hear Shadow's whimpers now, softer, more desperate. My chest tightened. I couldn't stand it. I thought of Luna. How I wished someone, anyone, had risked something for her. My eyes traced the cliffside. There, a faint goat path winding down the rock. It wasn't much, but it was a chance. A frayed rope from someone's old climbing setup hung nearby, anchored to a tree. Not ideal, but it might hold. I turned to the family. If that were your child up there, would you wait 2 hours? Their silence was my answer. I tied the rope around my waist, palms sweating, heart hammering. I'm going, I said, more to myself than anyone else. The first step off solid ground was the hardest. My boot touched the rock face, and for a moment, my whole body locked up. The rope creaked behind me, and I realized just how much I was trusting this thin, weathered line. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. One slow step, then another. The cliffside was rough and unforgiving. Each handhold scraped my skin, and loose gravel kept tumbling down past my boots. The higher I went, the more the world below blurred into dizzying colors, trees, cars, and worried faces becoming tiny specks. Just keep breathing, I whispered. Left hand, right foot. Don't look down. Shadow's bark echoed, sometimes loud and close, then faint and far away, like the wind was playing tricks on me. My muscles ached, but I pushed on. A flash of memory hit me. Luna chasing a ball in the backyard, her golden fur glowing in the sun. I could almost hear her happy bark. My throat tightened. This time, I muttered, I won't fail. I kept climbing, inch by inch, my fingers burning, heart pounding like a drum. Then I heard it, Shadow's bark again. But now there was something else, a strange sound, almost like a muffled voice, carried by the wind. My pulse spiked. What was that? About halfway down, I made the mistake of glancing up. A loose rock, no bigger than my fist, was teetering above me. I barely had time to react before it snapped free. Crack. Crash. It slammed into the rock a foot from my hand, sending shards flying. My grip slipped for a terrifying second, and my stomach dropped like I was falling through space. I froze, hugging the cliff, heart racing so fast I could hear the blood roaring in my ears. Someone shouted from above, Maya, hold on. But their voice sounded far away, almost distorted. I forced myself to breathe. You're fine. You're still here. Just hold on. The problem was, the rope was swinging slightly now, and my foothold was crumbling under my boot. One wrong move, and that was it. My fingers trembled, sweat making them slick. Then, as if sensing my fear, Shadow barked again. It wasn't frantic this time. It was steady, like he was calling to me. I clung to that sound like a lifeline. You're waiting for me, aren't you? I whispered. Okay, I'm coming. Summoning every ounce of strength, I shifted my weight, pressed my foot against a narrow crack, and pulled myself to a more stable ledge. My breathing slowed, but the fear didn't fade. I knew this climb wasn't just dangerous anymore. It was personal. When I finally spotted him, my heart nearly burst. Shadow was crouched on a narrow ledge, his fur coated with dust, his paws scraped raw. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. When our eyes met, he let out a soft, trembling whimper, as if he couldn't believe someone had come for him. Hey, buddy, I said, my voice shaking but calm. I'm here. You're okay now. I carefully lowered myself onto the ledge, my boots scraping against the stone. The space was barely wide enough for me to sit. The drop behind us was dizzying. One wrong shift, and we'd both be gone. Shadow backed up slightly, his ears low, tail tucked between his legs. He was scared, maybe even in pain. I slowly stretched out my hand, speaking softly. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." At first, he hesitated. Then, something shifted in his eyes. He sniffed my hand, and his body relaxed just a little. When he finally pressed his nose against my palm, I felt this wave of relief wash over me. I checked his legs. Thankfully, nothing was broken. He was just shaken and exhausted. I pulled out the rope I'd brought and looped it around him gently, tying a makeshift harness. "Okay, Shadow," I whispered, securing the knots with trembling hands. "Let's get you home." But just as I was about to signal the hikers above to start pulling, something incredible happened. I gave the ready signal and tightened Shadow's improvised harness. Then he did something that stopped me cold. Instead of leaning into me the way scared dogs usually do, he twisted his body and pulled away, pressing his weight toward the outer edge of the ledge. He whined, sharp and urgent, then looked straight down over the drop and barked. Not at me, not for help to go up. He wanted me to look down. My stomach flipped. Carefully, I eased forward and peered past the lip of rock. At first, I saw nothing but shadows and scrub clinging to the cliff. Then movement, a sleeve, a hand, someone wedged in a narrow crevice about 15 feet below us. "Hey," I shouted. "Can you hear me?" A weak answer drifted up. "Help, stuck, leg." The voice was young. A teenager. Dirt streaked their face. One leg twisted under rock. They must have slipped from the trail, fallen, and been hidden from view. No one on the ground could have seen them from below. Shadow hadn't been trapped by fear. He'd stayed because they couldn't climb, and he wouldn't leave. He'd been barking to bring people close enough to find the kid. I pressed my forehead to Shadow's and whispered, "You good boy. You brought us here." Everything changed in that instant. This wasn't just a dog rescue anymore. It was a race to save a human life, with a German Shepherd as my co-rescuer. I shouted up to the hikers on the ridge. "There's someone trapped below us. We need another rope, now." The urgency in my voice must have carried, because within seconds, they were scrambling to find anything we could use. Spare ropes, belts, even a long hiking strap. Meanwhile, Shadow stayed beside me, his ears forward, eyes darting between me and the teen below. He seemed to sense the tension, his body trembling, but he didn't move away. It was as if he knew we weren't done yet. "Hey, what's your name?" I called down to the kid. "Tyler," came the weak reply. "Tyler, you're going to be okay. I'm coming down, but I need you to stay as still as possible. Can you do that?" "Yes, I think so," he answered, voice cracking. One of the hikers threw down a sturdier rope they'd retrieved from their pack. I untied the makeshift harness from Shadow and clipped it around my waist. I was terrified, but there was no time to hesitate. I looked at Shadow. "Stay here, okay? Guard the ledge." It sounded silly, but something in his eyes told me he understood. I lowered myself down, inch by inch, until I reached Tyler's crevice. His leg was pinned under a wedge of rock. I braced my boots, pulled with all my strength, and managed to free him. "Can you climb?" I asked, breathless. "Not by myself," he said, grimacing. "Then you're coming up with me," I replied, looping the rope around him and securing him to my side. Above us, the hikers started pulling, and slowly, we began to rise. The moment we began climbing, I realized just how heavy the situation had become, literally. Tyler clung to me with all his strength, his weight pulling at my harness and making every movement twice as hard. My muscles screamed in protest. Each pull felt like dragging a boulder up a wall. "Don't look down," I whispered, partly to him and partly to myself. "We're going up, and we're not stopping." The rope strained with every tug from the hikers above. Pebbles and dust rained down as my boots scraped for grip. I felt my arms shaking, threatening to give out. But then I looked up. Shadow was leaning over the ledge, his ears pointed forward, barking in short, sharp bursts as if cheering us on. "Almost there, buddy," I called to him. The sight of that dog gave me strength I didn't know I had. Halfway up, my boot slipped on a loose rock. My heart shot into my throat. Tyler yelped, clinging tighter. I slammed my knee into the rock wall, bracing myself, and forced us to keep moving. Every inch felt like a victory. At last, a hiker's hand reached down. "Got you," he shouted. They grabbed Tyler first, hoisting him onto the ledge. Then, with one final heave, I pulled myself up beside Shadow, collapsing in the dirt. Shadow barked once, tail wagging furiously. It was like he knew we'd made it. I hugged him tight, whispering, "We did it, boy. We did it." But the incredible part? It wasn't over yet. Once we were all safely on solid ground, the questions started. Tyler was pale but conscious. Paramedics splinted his leg while I sat beside Shadow, still shaking. The dog wouldn't leave Tyler's side, even when his own family called. That's when I knew something deeper had happened up there. Between sips of water and winces of pain, Tyler told us the story. When the thunder cracked and Shadow bolted off the trail, Tyler, hiking a little ahead of his group, saw the dog run toward the overlook. He tried to call him back, worried the dog would go too close to the edge. In that instant, the ground beneath Tyler collapsed. He slid, scraped, and dropped into the narrow crevice where we'd found him. He shouted, but the wind carried his voice away. Shadow could have kept running. Instead, he crawled down to the ledge above Tyler and stayed. All afternoon, through wind, through falling gravel. When Tyler passed out, Shadow barked. When Tyler stirred, Shadow barked again. He paced, whined, and refused to climb higher, even when he could have. He was calling for anyone who would listen. That's why he fought the harness when I first tied it. He wasn't afraid of me. He just wasn't leaving without the kid he decided to protect. I looked at Shadow, then at Tyler, and felt something settle inside me. Something I'd been carrying since Luna disappeared. Sometimes we think we're the rescuers. But sometimes, the ones we save are the ones who save us right back. Within minutes of getting Tyler and Shadow secure on the ledge, the official rescue crew finally reached us from the upper trail with proper gear. They clipped Tyler into a basket litter, rigged a controlled haul, and inched him up the remaining vertical section. I followed on a safety line. Shadow was last, cradled in a rescuer's arms, still watching Tyler the whole way up. When we crested the rim, people rushed forward, Tyler's hiking group on one side, Shadow's family on the other. For a moment, nobody knew who to hug first. The little girl who'd lost Shadow dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around his neck, sobbing into his fur. Tyler managed a shaky grin and reached to scratch Shadow's ear. The dog pressed between them like he belonged to both. That's when my knees finally gave out. I sat in the dirt, hands shaking, adrenaline draining out of me all at once. A paramedic shoved a bottle of water into my hand. Someone said, "You saved them." I just shook my head and looked at Shadow. "No," I said. He made sure we found him. Word about the rescue spread faster than I could have imagined. By the time we reached the trailhead, someone had already posted photos of Shadow and Tyler being helped up the cliff. People started calling him a hero dog. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The ranger who had coordinated the rescue approached me, shaking her head in disbelief. "In 20 years, I've seen some incredible rescues," she said. "But I've never seen an animal refuse to leave a human behind like that. That dog's got a heart bigger than this whole mountain." Shadow's family hugged me over and over, their gratitude pouring out in tears and words I couldn't fully absorb. "We thought we lost him forever," the little girl's mother whispered. "But because of you, and because of him, 2 lives were saved today." Tyler's parents arrived shortly after, faces pale and drawn. They clutched their son, thanking every person who had lifted a rope or shouted a word of encouragement. When they learned about Shadow's part in keeping Tyler alive, the father knelt down, looked into the dog's eyes, and simply said, "Thank you." I watched as Shadow wagged his tail, leaning into the little girl's arms while Tyler gently scratched behind his ears. For a brief, quiet moment, it felt like the mountain itself had stopped to witness this unlikely bond. A dog, a boy, and the strangers who'd come together to pull them back from the edge. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. My arms and legs ached, my palms were scraped raw, but none of that compared to the weight of what I'd witnessed. Shadow wasn't just a dog who needed saving. He was a guardian. When faced with fear, he chose loyalty. He stayed on that ledge for hours, barking into the void, not for himself, but for someone else, someone he didn't even know. How many of us can say we'd do the same? As I sat in my car, the last rays of sunset painting the sky, I thought about Luna. I'd carried the guilt of losing her for so long, like a scar I couldn't hide. But Shadow reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Animals have hearts that see beyond fear, beyond pain, and sometimes beyond reason. They teach us to care even when it hurts. Tyler's safe. Shadow's home. And me? I think I found a part of myself I'd lost. Courage doesn't come from being fearless. It comes from loving something enough to act, even when fear is clawing at your throat. If you've ever doubted the power of kindness or the bond between humans and animals, remember this story. Remember Shadow, the dog who risked everything to make sure a stranger wasn't left behind. Because sometimes, the most incredible rescues aren't the ones we plan, they're the ones that find us when we least expect it. Sometimes, life places us in moments that test everything we think we know about courage, loyalty, and love. On that cliff, I went there believing I was the rescuer, but in the end, it was Shadow who taught me what true bravery looks like. Think about it, a single dog, stuck on a ledge, refusing to leave because his heart told him to stay. He didn't care about the danger. He didn't care about the storm. He just knew that a life was in trouble, and he wouldn't walk away. Shadow reminded me, and maybe reminds all of us, that heroes don't always look like we expect them to. Sometimes, they have 4 legs, wagging tails, and eyes filled with the kind of love this world desperately needs. As I watched him reunited with his family, I realized this story wasn't just about a rescue. It was about hope, about connection, about choosing to be there for someone, even when it's hard. So, tell me, when was the last time you saw something truly selfless? Maybe it's closer than you think. Maybe it's waiting right beside you.